For example 2, it asks for the sine of pi over 12. Now, pi over 12 is similar to 75 degrees in that it's not on the unit circle, so we can't just look it up. We will have to find two things that add or subtract to get pi over 12. So, in order to help myself, I am going to take all of the angles in the first quadrant, and I'm running out of room, pi over 2. And I'm going to get them to have a common denominator of 12. So then I can kind of see what would work together to add or subtract to be 1 pi over 12. So this would be 6 pi over 12. This would be 2 pi over 12. This would be 3 pi over 12. And this would be 4 pi over 12. And I just did that using fraction properties. So now I look and I'm like, if I take something minus something else, can I get 1 pi over 12? And I can see it right here. If I took 4 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12, I would get 1 pi over 12. I have another option here, 3 pi over 12 minus 2 pi over 12. I could do that too. So either one would work. I'll just use these two. So in order to break down pi over 12, I would do 3 pi over 12 minus 2 pi over 12, which is the same as pi over 4 minus pi over 6. So I took the angle and found two things that subtract to get that angle. Once that's done, then I can go and I can say, well, I have the sine of a difference, the sine of subtracting two angles, so I can use that formula, the second one. And every time I see an alpha in the formula, I'll use pi over 4, and every time I see a beta, I will use pi over 6. So here we go. Sine of alpha would be sine of pi over 4. Cosine of beta would be cosine of pi over 6 minus cosine of alpha would be cosine of pi over 4. Sine of beta would be sine of pi over 6. So, figured out which two angles to use, got the formula, wrote it down, and now I'll look up each of those four things. Sine of pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. Cosine of pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 2. Cosine of pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2. Sine of pi over 6 is half. So I have here the top would be square root of 6 over 4 minus square root of 2 over 4. And then if I subtract those, I have a common denominator of 4. And the tops would be square root of 6 minus square root of 2.